Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Thank you for coming. It's nice to see your faces. It would be nice to see some teenagers in the room right now. This sermon is really for them. No, actually, I only give sermons for me. Sorry. So this sermon's for me, and hopefully you can get something from it too. That didn't come out right. If I give a sermon and you feel aggravated by it, please understand that's a common reaction that I have in my own sermons, okay? So anyway, today I want to talk about the fact that there's no freedom without responsibility. First, I'd like to talk about what is responsibility. The dictionary definition is that responsibility is the state or fact of being accountable for or to blame for something. And why is taking responsibility so hard? Primarily, you're to blame. Does that feel good? No, it doesn't feel good. You're to blame, you know. We tend to, as a species, we tend to go towards things that make us feel good and run away from things that make us feel bad. So taking responsibility is a tough one. But why is not taking responsibility, i.e. blaming others, so easy and attractive? Well, that's easy to answer. It's easy to blame other people. It's easy to blame the government, the weather, your co-workers, your boss, your children, your wife, your husband, your mother, your father. But taking responsibility means you have to do the work to change whatever needs to be changed, to overcome whatever needs to be overcome. So I think we can all understand how taking responsibility is important. Because another word for responsibility is ownership. Are you in ownership of your life? Do you own your life? If you are the owner, or are you just renting? It's a different philosophy. Every landlord knows the difference. Because when you own your own car, you drive it a lot more carefully than you do a rental vehicle. When you own your own house, you take care of it. You improve it, you invest into it. When you rent a house, you don't invest into it, you don't improve it, you don't do paint jobs or remodels or anything like that. So, taking responsibility for your life, think of it as ownership. Are you an owner of your life? Are you the owner of your business? Are you the owner of your marriage? Are you the owner of your health? Are you the owner of your financial situation? Are you the owner? Or is the owner some mysterious force outside of yourself? I'd like to name a couple of examples. I mean, there's so many, but people that have inspired me in various different ways from their example of taking responsibility and not blaming others. So the first example is Geoffrey Canada. There's a very good documentary about him called Waiting for Superman. And it's basically about when he was a kid, he loved Superman. The idea of the man coming in and saving the day and rescuing, whoever needed to be rescued and making everything right, and then, thank you, Superman, and off he flies. And he loved that concept. But as he grew older, he realized there is no Superman, and Superman's not coming. And he saw the situation in the schooling, especially the inner city schools, and he decided, I've got to do something about it. So he took responsibility, and now he's the president of the Harlem Children's Zone. And basically his focus is getting inner city children to graduate high school and to go to college. And there's a really good TED Talk that he gives, in which he explains that in his school zone, 100% of kids go to college. 100%. And he says there's no excuse as to why this percentage can't be replicated around the country. And why is it that the failing school system in this country hasn't been changed in the last 50 years, he thinks is reprehensible, and I agree with him. But that's Geoffrey Canada, aka Superman. This is David Goggins. David Goggins was a 300-pound, frustrated 20-year-old, decided whilst he was treating for pest control in this particularly nasty restaurant with cockroaches and rats, everywhere, this is not my life. And he just left his canister on the floor, walked away, drove home, decided to make something of himself. So he's 300 pounds, and he calls up the army recruiters and says, I want to join the army. They're laughing at him. How much do you weigh? Ha ha ha. You have to lose like 100 pounds in the next 6 months in order for you to enlist for your height weight average. He says, okay. So he starts running. The first day he runs quarter of a mile and then walks home crying with frustration. But within 6 months, he's managed to make it into the army. Then he goes on to become a Navy SEAL. He's the first person in Navy SEAL history to complete 3 Hell Weeks in 1 year. And that's, if you want to know what Hell Week looks like, you can go online and check it out. It's the BUDS training system, and it goes on. It's a brutal endurance. So he does that 3 times in 1 year, and then gets into the Navy SEALs. And then now he's an ultra-marathon runner, inspirational speaker. You can even hire him to come and live with you for a month to motivate you and push you to places that you never thought you could go. That's a joke, but he actually did that for one client of his. And then we have an example of Jack Ma. Jack Ma is the Chinese founder of Alibaba, and he'll tell you how many multiple job offers were declined. He wanted to work for KFC in China, and he said there were 25 applications. 24 got in, but not him. And then he goes to apply at a five-star hotel, and in that application process he had to wait for 3 hours, and then almost everyone got in except for him. And then he'll go on and on and on. Eventually he became a teacher. And then within a few years he was voted by the students to be the best teacher in that school. He was very talented at communicating. And then he decided, to improve my ability to teach, I need to have more life experience. So he decided, I'm going to leave the school for 10 years, go out and do something, and then come back and teach about it. So he decided to go out, and then he founded this company called Alibaba, which is like China's version of Amazon. Huge success, multi-billionaire. And but basically his credo was, even though I've been rejected and I have a string of failures to my name, but the opportunity is still out there. That was his mindset. And then there's Joyce Meyer, founder of Meyer Ministries, Joyce Meyer Ministries. Her quote is, "A lot of people never get to where they want to be because they never stop complaining about where they're at." Think about that for a minute. Are we complaining about where we're at? I think most of us are, maybe all of us. And, what is making us go forward? The power of complaining. What does it do? Does it increase your ability to move your life forward? Does it increase your levels of happiness? Does it motivate you? If you complain harder. Have you read books called Complain Your Way to Success? I mean, there is a quote which says, you can make excuses or you can make money, but you can't do both. Have you heard of that one? I think complaining is a natural phenomenon. But it is something that we need to really watch out for, because it is robbing us. That attitude of not taking responsibility, not taking ownership, that tendency that we all have is right there in the fall of man, right at the very beginning of documented human history, if you can call the Bible documented. But, what did Eve say when she was confronted by God? It was the serpent. No, first of all, it was Adam. Adam said, it was the woman that you put in the garden with me. She made me do it. What did the woman say? She said, it was the serpent that you put in the garden, that he made me do it. That is the proclivity of human beings. Right there, in our original human ancestors. Not taking ownership, not taking responsibility, putting the blame on others, putting the blame on God. But we know that God endowed us with responsibility. Why? Why is it important for God to honor our responsibility, to not intervene, to not interfere? Why? We have to ask ourselves that question. That is the question that really stumps people. Why doesn't God intervene? Why doesn't God do this? Why doesn't God do that? Because that's our responsibility. And God, if God is an absolute being, he will absolutely not violate his own principles. So, our responsibility. But how do we see the world? Are we looking at it in 3D vision, or are we looking at it through a straw? Oh, yeah. Story about the frog. What's the reality for the frog at the bottom of the well? He looks up, he sees the world as a long, thin tunnel with light at the end of it. Sounds like death. But what is the world really? Here's a story that is both tragic and at the same time has an important lesson. The story of Mohini. Mohini was a great white tiger that was gifted to the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. in the 1960s. They didn't have a tiger before then, so they decided, we'll stick this tiger, this magnificent beast, into a 12 foot by 12 foot cage, and then we'll build this area. Now, tigers in nature, they occupy hundreds of square miles. They're very protective of their area. They need a lot of space in order to, breed and in order to hunt. But in captivity, they don't do so well. This tiger was put in a 12 foot by 12 foot cage for several years whilst they were building a multiple acre area, enclosure, lush forest, rolling hills, large pond. And then the release day came. They transported Mohini to this beautiful enclosure after, several years of it being in captivity. And what did they expect? They expected the tiger to jump out of its cage, run around this enclosure, enjoying its new freedom. And what did it do? It went to a perimeter wall, marked out its own 12 foot by 12 foot area, and just roamed this small section of the enclosure for the rest of its life. Apparently not aware of this massive enclosure, multiple acres that it was in. That's a tragic story, but it has an important lesson in our life. The important lesson is that whatever background you came from, whatever you've been told, whatever limitations have been imposed upon you by your parents, your teachers, your caregivers, whatever people were influential in your life, your friends, your family members, it's all not necessarily true. What kind of self-imposed prison cell have you put around yourself? I can't do that. Oh, I couldn't possibly do that. It's not necessarily true. You might be like Mohini in that large enclosure, but only occupying a tiny percentage of your potential. I think as a parent, when we look at our children and we see their great potential and we see how they're behaving and we compare the two, it's difficult for us not to feel disappointed sometimes. Because we see their potential and then we see the reality of what they're doing with that potential. Nothing. It's disappointing. And I believe this is how God looks at us. He gives us massive potential. He endows us with responsibility so that we can explore that potential and be able to reciprocate with this magnificent creator being. He puts us in this massive enclosure called planet Earth, or the universe, because we're leaving our own planet now. And what are we doing? And God is looking at us going, are you kidding me? That's it? Look inside, look outside, please. Look at the enclosure. Don't just pace around this 12 foot by 12 foot area. Go beyond it. So, here are the lessons. Ask ourselves this. What is holding me back? Identify what part of this problem is actually under my control. And resolve to take responsibility for everything in our life that is within our control. Don't complain. That's the lesson from Joyce Meyer. Take responsibility. That's a lesson from Geoffrey Canada. Push against your comfort zone. That's a lesson from David Goggins. And explore your potential. That's a lesson from Jack Ma. And take your power back. Because if you give up ownership, you're giving up power. If you complain, you're putting the power somewhere else. Stopping complaining, taking responsibility, taking back the ownership of your choices, of your life, of your family, of your marriage, of your parenting, of your business, is going to put the power back in you, in an area where something that can be done about it will get done about it, because you will do it. So have a blessed and productive week. Thank you very much. Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your love and your blessing. Thank you for giving us so much potential. Thank you for trusting us with that potential and that responsibility, and for not interfering with it, so that we can explore, develop, grow, and give back. Help each and every one of us, because all of us have difficulty in realizing our potential, in pushing back beyond our comfort zone, and exploring the areas of our life that we have not yet explored. Please help us. Please give us the courage that we need in order to do that, to break down the barriers around our life, and to really make a contribution to this world, like the people in the examples we've just been shown have made massive contributions to the people around them. We thank you once again for guiding us, and we offer you this prayer through Christ our Lord.